In the years leading up to the Civil War, Maryland stood at a unique crossroads. It was part southern, part northern, and shaped by rural communities and shifting economic realities. Within these changing conditions, we find a brief record of one individual, Charlotte Brady. On the 1860 census, she appears as a 46-year-old free African American supporting her family as the head of her household. Like many free black women in Maryland, Charlotte worked as a washerwoman, a job that was always in high demand but paid very little. The work was physically exhausting and provided little opportunity for long-term financial security. Maryland also had one of the largest free black populations in the country. By 1860, more than 83,000 free black residents lived in the state, navigating a society where freedom existed, but alongside strict racial laws and restricted opportunities. Even in a brief census entry, we can see the outlines of the economic world Charlotte lived in, one shaped by limited rights, restricted work, and the realities faced by free black families in Maryland. The first major economic force shaping Charlotte Brady's life was limited labor opportunity. In 1860 Maryland, free black women faced discrimination on two levels, both race and gender. One historian of Anne Arundel County explains that many black women were simply lucky if they could find paid work at all. Because of these barriers, most jobs open to free black women were in domestic service. During this time, in Annapolis, 99 out of 190 working black women were servants, and 81 were washerwomen. Almost the entire female labor force clustered in a few low-status jobs. Charlotte fits this pattern exactly. When the census lists her as a washerwoman, it isn't just a random detail. It shows how the labor market pushed free black women into a narrow range of work. We can also see that this kind of labor was in demand. In an 1854 ad from the Evening Star, a woman advertised herself as a housekeeper and seamstress or as cook, washer, and ironer. That kind of ad tells us white households were actively searching for women who could wash, iron, cook, and sew. Charlotte's skills would have been valuable to rural families in Hartford County who needed this work done but didn't want to do it themselves. Even though the work was needed, it was far from secure or prosperous. Accounts of washerwomen later in the 19th century describe extremely hard conditions. Women carried heavy buckets of water, made their own soap, boiled and scrubbed clothes by hand, then wrung, dried, and ironed everything before delivery. A Smithsonian summary notes washerwoman's work was difficult and demanding, involving hauling gallons of water and using heavy metal irons over long days, often Monday through Saturday. Wages were low and unstable. Studies of black laundresses after the Civil War estimate that even when they charged by the dozen pieces, they might clear only about 10 cents profit per dozen after paying for soap and supplies. Another museum account of Southern washerwomen reports a typical monthly pay between $4 and $8, with women frequently underpaid or not paid at all when customers decided to withhold payment. Even if exact numbers in Maryland differed slightly, the overall pattern is clear. The job brought in cash, but never much security. For Charlotte Brady, becoming a washerwoman was both an opportunity and a limitation. On one hand, laundry work gave her a way to earn money in a world where very few jobs were open to free black women. The consistent demand for clean clothes helps explain how she could appear in the census as the head of a household with dependents. On the other hand, this work depended entirely on her physical strength and on the decisions of white customers. It offered no promotion, no property, and almost no chance to build wealth over time. In short, the labor market in 1860 channeled Charlotte into washerwoman work, allowed her to survive, and at the same time kept her on the edge of economic insecurity. To understand Charlotte Brady's world, we have to look beyond her occupation and examine the broader community she lived in. By 1860, Maryland had one of the largest free black populations in the United States. And unlike other southern states, Maryland's free black residents were heavily concentrated in rural counties, communities where freedom existed alongside deep structural barriers. Women made up a significant share of this population. In fact, free black women accounted for more than one-half of free black residents in the Upper South. One historian explains that free female blacks comprised 52.3% of the free black population, and that many of these women became heads of households because men had fewer stable opportunities and because women had even less mobility. This gender imbalance shaped the entire structure of free black communities. Many families were led by mothers, grandmothers, or older sisters, women who worked locally, raised children, and supported extended relatives. Charlotte's own census record reflects this pattern exactly. She lived in a rural county, supported multiple children, and appeared as the head of her household. Even though these communities were free, their opportunities were extremely limited. Certain counties required free black residents to register with a local court. Travel sometimes required written permission. Job opportunities were scarce, wages were low, and access to property or credit was almost non-existent. Economic mobility, moving to a better job or better town, was often impossible, so most free black families remained in the same rural place generation after generation, working the same type of jobs and building survival networks within the local community. For Charlotte, this meant that the world she lived in was both familiar and constrained. She was surrounded by other free black families, many led by women like herself, but her ability to change her circumstances was limited by the law. These structural forces shaped every choice available to her, from where she lived to the kind of work she performed to how she raised her children. In a state with growing free black communities, Charlotte's life shows us how freedom could exist alongside deep economic immobility. Charlotte Brady's census record reveals another key economic dimension of her life. She was the unmarried head of a household with 9 people living under her care. Of those, 4 were her own children, ranging in age from 8 to 14. This age spread is important because it shows us both the demands placed on Charlotte and the ways her children may have contributed to the household economy. In free black communities across the Upper South, female-headed households were common. As the Maryland State Archive explains, the sexual imbalance of the free black caste placed many black women at the head of their household. Women often had to create stability in conditions where employment for men was inconsistent, mobility was limited, and the economic burden fell disproportionately on mothers. Charlotte's children, like many others in free black families, would have played a direct role in the household's survival. Her oldest children, ages 12 to 14, were old enough to help with daily labor, including assisting with washing, hauling water, collecting fuel, caring for younger siblings, and possibly earning small wages from seasonal or informal work. The younger children contributed in smaller ways, but even that support mattered in a home where every task had economic weight. At the same time, Charlotte faced the challenges of raising children under significant legal and economic restrictions. Free black families had limited access to schooling, limited property rights, and no meaningful safety net. Because her income as a washerwoman depended entirely on physical labor, any illness, exhaustion, or shortage of clients threatened not just her earnings, but her children's well-being as well. Her census entry shows a household built on constant work, shared responsibility, and resilience. In families like Charlotte's, children were not just dependents, they were active participants in the household economy. The family itself functioned as a coordinated economic unit, working together to survive within a system that offered freedom in name, but few tools for long-term security. The last major force shaping Charlotte Brady's life was the legal environment in Maryland. Even though Charlotte was legally free, the laws of the state kept her under constant control and limited nearly every aspect of her life. As one historian puts it, Maryland legislators went to extreme lengths to dispute a black person's claim to freedom, tightening the law as the free black population grew. Free black people were often required to register in county records and carry proof of their freedom at all times. A Maryland law explained that any black person who was born free had to apply to the county clerk for a certificate in order to leave their home county, and the clerk would keep a permanent registry of their description. If Charlotte traveled without papers, she risked being detained, fined, or even sold as if she were enslaved. Maryland also denied free black residents basic civil rights. They couldn't vote, they couldn't testify in many criminal trials, or even freedom suits involving whites. Black children were barred from public schools, even though their families paid taxes that supported the education system. Other laws regulated who free blacks could marry, whether they could own firearms, and even restricted religious gatherings without white supervision. In 1840, the state authorized orphans' courts to summon the children of free black parents and bind them out as apprentices if officials claimed it was for their own good, effectively giving local authorities power over poor families' children. For Charlotte, these laws meant that her freedom was always conditional. She had no political voice, limited legal protection against exploitation, and very little ability to move, educate her children, or use the courts to defend her rights. The same system that recorded her as a free woman and head of household also worked every day to keep her and her family from ever fully escaping economic and social dependence. Charlotte Brady's life illustrates how economic structures shaped individual outcomes in 1860 Maryland. Limited labor options pushed free black women into domestic work, legal restrictions narrowed their mobility and rights, and family survival depended on shared labor within female-led households. Her story shows how freedom existed alongside deep economic constraints, which revealed the broader patterns that defined the American economic life for free black communities before the Civil War.